Hi, and thank you for listening. This is Sherry Andrea, and I appreciate your time. This um this this talk from my higher self is regarding pride. And in case this is the first time you've listened to anything that I've done, um, like I said, my name is Sherry Andrea. I'm a higher self channel, um, and I'm going to get right into it. Um, First of all, I see examples of pride all the time, and probably so do you. Sometimes we see things that are going on with people. Sometimes we don't think about what it is. But I'll tell you, once you start consciously working on yourself or consciously working on your spiritual path, your spiritual advancement, you begin to notice things that you didn't before, because the things that you are reading about, the things that you're learning, now when you see the examples of them, you spot them. You're like, oh, I know what that is, because you've been reading about it, you've been learning about it, you've been trying to understand those things to try to help your own self. And so then you begin being able to spot them in other people. I remember, um, when I was doing a lot of reading and meditating and trying to understand so many different things that I was learning. I remember when it came to pride, there were times when I thought I knew what pride was. And I remember there was a time when I thought, I don't have a problem with pride. Thinking, I'm usually, nice to people. I tend to be very overly sympathetic, understanding. I usually tend to be non-judgmental. So, I was thinking, I don't, I don't really think I have a problem with pride, but I wasn't really sure. So I remember thinking, okay, well, I'll watch out for it. But I also remember from what I read, and I'll share this with you. I knew that when it came to being, spiritual advancement and being on a spiritual path and working towards enlightenment, that one of the biggest things that you needed to watch out for was pride. The saying, pride goeth before the fall. I had read many things about pride from um, Buddhist master writing, Hindu master teachers' writings. I'd read many things about pride and how bad it was and how it could take you down. And one of the things that I had learned about it was that I gained this understanding, and that's the one thing, even though I wasn't sure, I could recognize pride even in myself. The one thing I definitely knew is I knew how important it was to not make that fall, as in pride goeth before the fall, because um, how bad it could take you down. And what I mean by that is, let's say you've been working on your spiritual advancement for a long time, maybe 20, 30 years, and you'd reached a high spiritual level. Maybe you had reached the beginning stages of enlightenment, and maybe you would even fully merge with your higher self. Well, at that point where you've learned so much and you've resolved so much within yourself, it's easy for pride to get you, because you're sitting at this place where you're like, yeah, I know a lot. I understand a lot. You're even sitting at a place where you kind of feel like, I know everything. I understand everything. Yeah, there's some things I have left to work on, but I've learned, I have this understanding, and I've merged with my higher self, and I also have this understanding that comes from my higher self. So really, and excuse my French, you get to this point where really you think your shit doesn't stink. And I'm sorry to have to say it like that, but that's the reality of it. Is how you're feeling. You're feeling like, no, and people have to respect me. I've earned that. And I'll be honest with you. I'll be very honest with you. I felt that way. I got to a certain point where I spent years with a spiritual practice of praying, meditating, saying decrees and mantras 4, 5, 6 hours a day. I had really sacrificed. I sacrificed a lot. And I knew that. And, it got to that point where I started to notice that anytime someone, let's say, someone who didn't know me as someone on a spiritual path or didn't know me as a spiritual coach or teacher, anytime I found myself challenged by someone who just knew me as Sherry, she lives in the same neighborhood I do, you know, Sherry, an acquaintance of mine, but that didn't know me like she's a spiritual teacher, didn't know me like that. Whenever I was challenged by them, I noticed that I became offended. I would even say to them, you may not understand this, but I've earned a certain level of respect. And yeah, after the fact, I would be like, of course, I would be like, I'd be like, replaying it in my head, what I had said. I'd be like, okay, I know I didn't handle that the right way. I know. And I kept thinking to myself, am I having a problem with ego? Am I having a problem with ego? The reason why I had a hard time really answering that question, because you may say, oh, well, yeah, you were having a problem with ego. Yeah, but it was more than that. It was like, okay, what specifically? And it was pride. Pride goeth before the fall. Now, you're going to make those mistakes, and it's okay to make those mistakes. Don't let anyone tell you it's not okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to have a wrong understanding or a limited understanding for a period of time. That's what happens on your way to growth. As you are advancing, you're constantly changing. Your knowledge, your understandings, everything, it's constantly changing, morphing, growing, transforming. So don't feel like it's not okay to make these mistakes. Making the mistakes is how you learn, but what you want to try to avoid is you want to try to avoid making the mistakes and continuing going in that direction. Some people hit that point and pride gets them a little bit more than it gets other people for a while. It's not permanent, because nothing is permanent. Everything's always in a state of change. So I don't see it as being permanent. So we don't need to judge or shame someone, because whatever they are today, I guarantee you they won't be that tomorrow. If somebody has surprised you in their behavior, it's okay. You don't have to judge them, because that's today. Tomorrow, for them, their higher self might be able to, might come through a little bit louder, and that light bulb may go on, and they may go, oh, I get it now. So today is today, but tomorrow is going to be different. So we don't need to like judge anyone when they're going through lessons, they're going through tests, they're tripping over those little potholes here and there. We don't need to judge anybody. It's going to happen. Actually, when you see people doing things that you're like, oh, okay, that's, you may want to say that's not right. They're wrong. They have a they have a wrong understanding, and you may want to scream that out to them. You may actually want to reach out or comment and correct them. However, be very careful, because there is karma for doing that. It is karmically bad to tell someone they are wrong. Now, we're not saying go along with someone who is wrong. If somebody says, let's jump off of this bridge, it's okay to not go with them. Now, I'm not saying you don't try to stop them, but sometimes what I just said about you wouldn't, not try to stop them, some people take that a little too far. Yes, it's true. you would want to stop them. You would want to be kind to them and try to talk to them, try to help them. Help them. Not hurt them, help them, right? So, yeah, you want to try and you want to make that effort, but sometimes people take that a little too far. They think it's their job to right wrongs, and it's not. Because sometimes the wrongs people are making are their lessons, their test, and you can't take that away from them. You are able to learn. You are able to spiritually advance. You're able to be on that path. You're allowed that. You are allowed that. And so you also want to turn around and you want to allow that to someone else as well. You had to learn at some point everything. You had to take knowledge in. You had to gain those understandings through meditation. You had to transform the knowledge to understanding, the understanding to wisdom. You were allowed that. You were allowed to do that. And now it becomes your turn to allow that next person to do that as well. Allow them to follow the same path that you followed, and keeping in mind you're both not going to trip over the same potholes. The potholes they trip over may not be ones you tripped over. Allow them that. That's how they learn. Don't take that away from them. It's okay to offer your help, but it's not okay to kind of put yourself in the middle of what may be their lesson. Don't just plop yourself down in the middle and go, you know, I've been assigned this task to right wrongs, correct untruths, to point out and smite down people who, I think I have perceived are doing wrong, being bad, misleading people. No, it's not your job. Who assigned you that job? Can you tell me that? Who assigned you that job? No one did. Be very, very careful that you don't take things too far. As humans, we do have that tendency to do that. If somebody says to you, it's your job to help humanity, so many of us have taken that way, way further than we were meant to. That does not mean that we're supposed to, like, anytime we see something, to jump in there and go, oh, I have to right that wrong. Oh, they're doing wrong. Oh, they don't understand the truth. Oh, they think this and it's really that. No, it's not. But believe me, if if Spirit wants you to jump in there and help, it will be made clear to you. Absolutely. You won't miss it. But you got to be very careful, because sometimes ego can trick you. Ego can trick you and have you thinking, being so pushed to do something and pushed in a direction. And the way it can do that, the way it can push you, it can have you thinking that that's your higher self when it's not. And that's why it's so important to get to know your ego. Get to recognize when it's your ego and when it's your higher self. And the only way you can do it takes time. It takes a long time. But you have to get to the point where you can recognize it, where you can know when it's ego and you can know when it's your higher self. And it is distinctive. It is distinctive. Um Also, the great thing is that by working on merging with your own higher self, getting to the point where you can recognize when it's your higher self coming through and when it's not, it'll also be able to allow you to see that in others, so that you will never accidentally follow the wrong person, follow the wrong teacher, end up following them down the rabbit hole. You'll never do that. The reason why is because you'll also be able to more easily recognize when someone has really, truly, and fully merged with their higher selves and when they haven't. You'll be able to spot it. It becomes way more distinctive to you. But I think it's important to let you know that, when it comes to pride, yeah, those things happen to me where, there were times when I felt offended. There were times when I felt like, oh, they're not giving me the respect that I've earned because I've made such sacrifice and they haven't made any. And how dare they treat me this way or behave this way to me? Don't they know how much I sacrificed to advance to where I have? And you may make that mistake too. I mean, you may start feeling that way, but it's temporary. You're still learning, you're still growing. Just pay attention. First, you have to read up on all of the things that are of the ego. For example, anger, frustration, envy, jealousy, pride, resentment, anxiety, etc., etc., etc. You need to read up on them so that you can understand them fully. I have a book that you can download for free on my website, um, on the downloads page. It's actually called Intro to Reiki, but it's basically for anyone who wants to be a true healer. And inside of it, it has what is some refer to as the lighthouse filters. Lighthouse filters are the things of the ego that filter the light or that dim the light, which are things of the negative ego, which I just mentioned, frustration, envy, jealousy, pride, resentment, anxiety, etc., etc. Okay, so you can, um, in that book, I wrote about many of them in detail, giving examples. Um, to be able to recognize these things in yourself, you have to understand them. You have to be able to know what it is you're looking for, to be able to spot it. So it really does help to understand the things of the negative ego, not just the negative ego. Because, sometimes for a period of time, someone does understand what the ego is. They have a basic understanding. Now we're talking about kind of getting a little bit deeper of an understanding of the ego, what it consists of, what it sometimes does. We're to try to help you recognize it, because it's just all about controlling it. You're not trying to get rid of it. It is a part of yourself, so you're not trying to get rid of it. Everything is about balance. There is light as well as dark in all of us, but it's about balance. We control the darkness, we control the bad that's within in us as we try to let the good come to the front. Same thing with the higher self. We want to fully merge with the higher self so that one day we are fully merged and we are acting more as the higher self and less of the what I call the lesser self, or sometimes people call it the shadow self. It's called by many different names. Don't get hung up on the label, like a certain teaching being called something. Recently I was talking to a friend of mine about, and I'm not going to mention any names, the specific situation, but we were talking about some teaching that is not an original teaching, because nothing is an original teaching. All these teachings that you hear people talking about, they're not original. However, it's not unusual that sometimes people take a teaching or a method that has been around for a very long time, and they kind of clean it up a little bit, put a name on it. Oh, I'm going to call it this, package it, promote it to their students, or sell it, or write a book on it. But we're still, it's just a label. That teaching, that method, it's been around forever. It's not new, but it's been maybe cleaned up a little bit, reorganized a little bit, maybe put down and explained in a way where students can more easily use it and get something out of it. And then they put a name on it, they put that label on it. We'll call it this. But it's still just a label. I don't tend to get hung up in labels because you'll notice that as I share things with you, you'll notice that I don't think I've ever called something, oh, it's this technique. This, you're going to do this and it's called this technique. I don't I don't tend to get hung up on labels. I tend to just get to the point, and whatever it is we're talking about, whatever it is I'm trying to share with you that you can work on, I just get to the point and tell you how you can do that, what to watch out for, what to look out for. But I don't get hung up on the little things that really don't matter, really don't make any difference. Um, so that's the first thing with pride, is that you have to be able to recognize it. Sometimes it helps to be able to recognize it when you see it in others. You see an incident or something happening between two people and you're like, "Oh, I get it. That's that person's pride getting in the way." Okay. So it does help sometimes if you can at least see an example of it. Um Now that doesn't mean you're meant to point that out to them or get in the middle of something and go, well, this is just your pride talking. No, don't do that. That is very bad karma to do that. But like I said, yes, you could stop somebody from jumping off the bridge. That is kindness. That is love. To try to help someone, um, to try to help them out so that they can feel better about themselves, so that they don't have to go to such drastic measures. That is kindness. That is love. However, pointing out a flaw in somebody, telling somebody you're this, you're that, you're the other thing, that's bad karma. Even outside of karma, that's just it's bad etiquette. Even if we're not talking about karma, it's bad etiquette. You just don't do that. I mean, I was raised in a way where I was taught that you don't do that. You treat people how you want to be treated. You try to be kind and polite to people. Um, you try to leave people as you find them. If you don't have anything to share or to offer that's going to make that person better, happier, if the only thing you have to give them is something that may hurt their feelings, make them feel bad, then it's best that you keep your mouth shut. It's best that you just, kind of sit down and be quiet. Sometimes there are times when it's just time to be silent and reserved, and to just pray for someone. You know what? It's funny, but when it comes to pride, there is another way to handle it. If you feel like someone is heading down the wrong path, they have a wrong understanding, instead of pointing the finger and trying to point it out to them and accidentally hurting their feelings or making them feel bad, instead, why don't you instead keep it between you and God, or you and your higher self, or you and the angels and ascended masters? Talk to them about it. Instead of taking the time to go to that person, point it out, or talk about them, they and end up hurting their feelings because they end up hearing that you talked about them. Um, Instead, and this is what I do, I keep it between me and God. There are some times when I do occasionally struggle with, oh, well, I feel this way about this. And sometimes I know it's my pride. But you know what? Instead of reaching out and ending up accidentally hurting a person, I I talk to God. I talk to my higher self. I say, I feel this way about it. I feel it. I mean, I have conversations with God. There's that book called Conversations with God that my friend Kier always talks about. I actually haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. Because I hear it's really, really good. But, every time I think about what I do so often every day, um, I think of that book because that is what I do. I have conversations with God. So often when I'm struggling with something or I'm thinking, oh, okay, this person did this or this person said this to me, sometimes instead of going back to them and hashing it out with them, sometimes I can't find a way to do that where I wouldn't hurt their feelings. So I go and I talk to God, I talk to my higher self, I talk to the angels and ascended masters, and I've never gone wrong doing that. And sometimes in talking to them, I just simply ask for that person to be helped, ask for myself to be helped. I just sincerely tell God and the angels and masters, just like I want to have always continue to advance and grow, so I want them to as well. I really want them to succeed in everything they do. That's love. The absence of pride is love. So if you manage to get rid of pride, that is what you have left. This sincere love and kindness. So sometimes, and I'll give you, before I wrap it up, I'll give you another example of pride recently. And like I said, I'm not going to mention any names, specifics, but recently, and sometimes this is what you'll see. There'll be like one psychic or spiritual teacher or something, and then there'll be another one, and they seem to be in competition with each other. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's just so many times I've been listening to a blog talk radio show, and you've got, you know, one host or guest talking, and maybe not specifically trashing a person, but literally putting down, oh, anyone who thinks this, they're just an idiot. And you're listening and you're thinking, oh my goodness, they're being so harsh. I remember I had asked a lady that was a guest on a radio show a really simple, basic question, and not even for myself, but because I was calling myself trying to be supportive because the question hadn't been asked, and I thought, well, I'll ask the question because maybe somebody listening, the answer will be helpful to them, and I kind of felt like, oh, this guest. I'd read a lot of her stuff and everything, and I kind of felt like, oh, she's probably going to have an awesome answer. So I asked the question and literally she turned on me. She made it seem, I don't know, it's so funny. It was like she took my answering the question wrong. It was just a question, it was a basic question. But she took it in her mind, I guess it was like she thought I was asking for a reason other than the basic reason I was asking. She thought I was asking because I was insinuating something. That my asking that question was like, sometimes if you ask the question, well, what about this? Well, sometimes a person believes maybe you're asking because you believe in that or you believe in doing that. But that wasn't the case here. It was just a question, and I really thought um, she would be able to answer the question well, and that her answer would be really good. Um, and boy, she just like went after me. She was very disrespectful, very rude, very condescending. And when I typed in the chat room, it was just a question. You really didn't have to be that harsh and mean. She then turned around and told me, oh, you thought I was being harsh? Oh, she thinks I'm being harsh and mean. Oh, honey, I'm not being harsh and mean. I'm just very passionate. No, that's not being passionate. If you have, look, here's the thing. This is how you know when you are being passionate and when you're not. The only person that can tell you whether or not you've hurt a person is that person. You yourself cannot be the one that determines and says, I have not hurt this person. Only they can tell you whether they've been hurt. Even if you didn't intend it, but you hurt them by your reaction, you still hurt them, and there's still karma. So throwing something out there like, oh, I'm just passionate about what I'm doing and about what I'm talking about. Don't make any mistake. It's not a valid excuse, and that excuse will not get you out of karma. So, what you try to do is you try to be careful. Hey, if you step in that hole by accident, it's okay. We all sometimes do. We all sometimes accidentally come off in a way we didn't mean to. Just simply say, oh, you know what? I'm really sorry. Maybe I was being a little, let me pull back up. I'm sorry. I apologize if I hurt your feelings. Um, but with many people, pride stops them from apologizing because that's the other thing with pride. Pride will stop a person from taking that step back and saying, you know what, if if I was wrong, or if I did hurt your feelings, I apologize. Maybe I shouldn't have done this the way I did it. Maybe I shouldn't have approached this the way I did. Maybe I could have approached it differently so that your feelings weren't hurt, but I still got my point across. You can never be afraid to apologize. Um, Being able to apologize means that you pride is not in the way and you are being humble. So often, this whole pride thing, what goes hand in hand with it is pride and humility. Often, when you have pride, you're vacant of humility. So often, the person who is for a period of time really suffering pride, often during that period of time, they're not exhibiting a lot of humility. It's okay because, like I said, they'll kind of realize it and they'll make the adjustments they need to make. And it's okay. Tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow is that other day for you to try to learn more and try to get it right. So there's always tomorrow. So don't feel like, it's the end of the world. It's not. And also, if you have a spiritual teacher or somebody that you like following, um, you do have to allow them to be human, and you do have to allow them to make mistakes. They are just like you. They're still on a spiritual path. We may all be at different points on that path, but we are still working on it. And it's kindness to allow them to be human, allow them to make mistakes. Don't be so shocked and so offended if they kind of trip in a hole one day. No, just say, you know what, the it seems they're having a little bit of trouble with this or that, but I have no doubt they'll get it together. Their higher self will help them. The angels, ascended masters will help them. I'll even pray, say a decree or something on their behalf and ask God to help them. That's what time is better spent. Instead of making a video to complain about what somebody else has said, somebody else has done, your time is better spent talking to God, asking God to help them. God, if it's not against your will, if you'll allow it, can you please help them? Can you please help them with the understandings, their understandings and seeing things more clearly? Help them be closer to their higher self. Time is better spent praying for them, decreeing on their behalf, asking God to help them out, and also asking God to forgive them. You know what? The funny thing is that often sometimes when you see people that are suffering from pride, they will tell you, oh, I'm a spiritual teacher. It's my job to make sure that students aren't being hurt by another person who's not telling the truth. But guess what? They may have never just stopped and done the very basic of things, the very basic and simplest of things, which is just simply pray for that person. Just simply say decrees on their behalf. Time is better spent that way. You can be of more help that way than you can speaking out and accidentally hurting somebody's feelings. Because you might knock somebody completely off their path, because you might hurt them so bad that it affects them so badly that they take a step back from being in service because they're so hurt and maybe in shock. I mean, and that happens often with psychic readers. Sometimes a client goes after them so strongly, so rudely, so negatively that it hurts them so bad and it throws them off guard and they can't do a reading for weeks before they can get back to it. It really can throw somebody off. And what a shame if that person was meant to help someone. There was somebody out there they were meant to help. And you just kind of threw them off. And now they're hurt and they're in shock and now they've kind of been thrown off from what is their purpose and what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be contributing to helping humanity. You have to just keep reminding yourself, I am not the only one that is out here trying to help humanity. And if I spend all my time fighting with the others like me who are supposed to be helping humanity, how am I helping humanity? If I'm spending all my time trying to hurt others who are supposed to be doing the same thing as me, no, it's a waste of time. Um, and like I said, there are many different ways. You'll eventually start recognizing pride and what it looks like when a person is having a problem with pride or and with different parts of the ego, envy, jealousy, frustration, anger, all those things. You'll recognize them more and more, but some of them are more easy to recognize than pride and humility. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, well, do you have ego? I remember way back when, I could remember so many times I was asked that question, well, do you have a problem with ego? No wonder I could never answer that question because it's not that simple. Have a problem with what specifically related to ego? Frustration, anger, jealousy, envy, pride? What specifically? You can't just say, "Do you have a problem with your ego?" No, that's kind of like asking a question in a very general way. Nobody will be able to answer that question. I mean, some might say, "Well, yeah, I have a problem with ego," because they understand what the ego consists of. So, remember, you do need to learn a little bit about what makes up the ego. All these different things I talked about. Um, and you can go to my website, sherryspeaks.com, and go to the download page. And on the download page, there's Reiki manuals there, but also um, um, in the beginning part of the page, you don't have to scroll down far. You'll see it says Introduction to Reiki. Excuse me. And it's free. You can download it. And I basically put everything in there. It's not really about Reiki and the traditional Reiki attunement. It's actually for those who are not just interested in becoming attuned to Reiki, but who are interested in becoming a true healer that is able to manifest change in people because they are holding a great amount of light, have high vibrations, meaning they have reached um a high level of spiritual advancement. So there's some really good things in there that are really helpful, along on your spiritual path. So, but I hope that this recording about pride has helped you. Remember, just look for it. You can see often examples of it, especially on social media, things people do, things people say, look out for them because you'll be able to recognize them. And the more you can learn to recognize it, then hopefully you'll then be able to recognize it in yourself. So that if you, like me, ever end up suffering that, you'll be able to spot it. You'll be able to recognize it. You'll be able to help yourself to not continue going down that road, but to stop yourself and kind of get yourself turned back around. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. You are all very, very wonderful. Remember, you can find me if you're looking for me. You can contact me through my website, sherryspeaks.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Namaste.